Gonna proc it now. Gonna proc it now. By Jackson Aurelia. Jackson Aurelia. Gonna proc it now. Gonna proc it now. Proc it. Jackson Aurelia. T-Force.
Welcome to the rework of the T-Force. Now we going hard cause we bumping at the beat source. It's a 3-course dinner of dudes bringing the news and stats, interviews and casts from the pro scene. So fresh and so clean, like you're leaning with Nami in the bot lane. Keep it hot like brand, practicing his dot game. Give it to you easy like you're Resi in a bot game. Imagine Draven at prime time. Now ulti like LeBlanc can copy that 4 times, but manlier. Knock it up like now fight planning a family-er. You gotta be tuned in like Sona on the ad wall. Get on the chat call. Can a podcast really be all that? Of course. How do 4 guys make a Triforce?
There's the live scene. Hey guys, you're listening to episode number 194 of the Trinity Force podcast. My name is Adam Potophobia Cogswell, and I come here very red-faced and beautiful this week, live from the beautiful state of Kentucky, talking with my best buddy in the whole wide world, Chira Jaden.
Hey.
And Jennifer Days, Untold. She's here with us.
Hi, everyone.
We're still waiting on that scream, the Cassiopeia scream.
It's not
Next time. Halloween, I'll do it.
Will you do it for Halloween? Can I
I'll
hold
do
you
it.
to that?
Yeah.
Are you gonna wear makeup too? Like, will you put like snakes in your hair and like do scales on your face?
I don't know about that. Maybe.
We need somebody to dress up for the podcast. That's really what we're looking out here for. Sean will do it, right?
Yeah, I'll definitely do it. I'll dress up like Cassiopeia, but just put the rats in my hair and call myself Ratsiopia.
He tried to use that joke before, and no one listened.
It wasn't good. It's not good, but I'm gonna keep saying it.
Okay, so last week I promised a listener name. Is it Allie? Am I getting that right? I believe to say. So Allie tweeted at us last week, and she said, hashtag true love. My husband isn't watching tonight because I love listening to we love listening to podcasts together. And if you look at the tweet she sent, the picture, it says, not watching T-Force just for you. So she asked, is that what true love is? And I thought that was hilarious, that there's a couple out there that actually waits to listen or watch the show together. Because I don't know if I'd ever want to watch this TV show with my significant other, or podcast with my significant other.
Do you want to explain the story about how you fucked up after the show last time?
No, we're not going to talk about how I fucked up after the show last time.
Adam's against love. That's all there is. He just hates love.
He admitted it before the show. He's not going to cop to it now, though.
I didn't admit anything. It's not there.
He allegedly admitted.
You are putting words in my mouth. The awful people. So guys, please go check out the Trinity Force podcast at trinityforcepodcast.com. And for those of you that need an update on Battle Arena, apparently it's on the 25th at 6 p.m. now. So what day is it? They're coming back on a Thursday, 25th at 6 p.m. And the reason they're doing that is because they've been waiting for spectator mode to come back. And so if you've been trying to join Battle Arena and have it for the past like 2 or 3 weeks, it's because spectator mode apparently has just been super buggy. And like if you watch the 5v5 we have, you couldn't even watch that because of how buggy it was. But yeah, that's where that's at. Other than that, we really don't have any awesome show news for you this week. So the 3-man show, no Claude, no Dom. I guess these 2 guys got to really put on their big boy shoes and step up.
I'm not wearing shoes, so this is going to be great.
Can I borrow someone's big boy shoes?
I'm saying Jen's not a boy, so she...
You're fucked, Adam.
Screwed.
We're
Yeah,
fucked.
it's all you.
Well, wrapping this show up already. All right, well, here we go. We're going to move over to the mailbag, and hopefully here's an hour of awesome questions, and you know what? No one's watching us tonight, so I can just fuck up all that I want. Ghost Upon writes, how should my team be positioned in a lost mid-game? What are the central goals of a squad under these circumstances? Do either of you want to start and take that first? Or should I just kind of jump in?
Go for it, Chief.
Okay, for a lost mid game, there's quite a number of tactics that you can take depending on what role you are and what is going on in the mid game. There's actually a question later on in here that would really go with it, but I can't find it at the moment. With that said, a lost mid game I'm going to assume is like tier 10-0, maybe 10-2, and we're walking the mid game. They've already picked up a dragon, or they're working toward picking up a dragon, and all your lanes are losing. Now, really at this point, you just have to tell yourself, I am not as powerful as the enemy team. I think that's the number one mistake players make is I can still solo this guy, or we can still 2v1 this guy, or we can do a 4-man gank into their 4-man gank bottom type of, those type of question or those type of things people tell themselves they can do, and then when they try to do it, it's all failed and lost. So you really have to step back and play safe, and it becomes a pick. It really becomes like picking at that point, or having the vision to make counter plays to their plays, depending on your team composition.
That's a huge one. It's just having your jungle warded. Make them come to you. If you can fight under a tower, it's like having another person with you on your team. And usually if they're that ahead of mid-game where you're having difficulty fighting them, they're going to be really cocky and dive and make plays that they shouldn't. So if you have the vision and you can get them to dive you under tower, then you should be able to make some plays and kind of get back in the game. You want to make sure, especially if you're starting to lose mid-game, you want to make sure that you have someone building pretty tanky, so that way you can sustain the damage that they're putting out. And, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that.
And also make sure that you're using sweepers or pinks or other things to clear the enemy vision of your jungle as well. It will help kind of funnel them into fighting or going towards a lane where you can fight under turret and try to get a slight advantage being under a turret or situation like that. And it also gives you the opportunity to potentially catch somebody on their team out by themselves without the risk of, hey, they have a ward in that bush and they know you're there the whole time, and next thing you know, your little secret group of people that are sitting in a bush getting ready to kill the next person who goes by just gets engaged on because it turns out they had a ward there the whole time. So
yeah, try not to go anywhere alone, or unless your jungle is completely warded, then you're a little bit safer, but chances are they have vision on you. So I don't know how many times people have gotten to, like, caught doing buffs and things like that.
Yeah, you know, another big thing, like you mentioned earlier with the building tanky, like you need to stop building offensively. Basically, a lot of people will continue to finish their Trinity Force, or will continue to finish their next big item, especially if they're a tank or an engaging type of role, and they don't look at it as if I keep building those, I'm going to die. Instead, you need to counteract what the enemy's building, and the enemy obviously is ahead, so they're trying to get more ahead by building more damaging items more than likely, and that's where they're going to get overconfident, because that next 720 gold could be dumped into a chain vest rather than a double longsword or, you know, part of a phage or whatever you were building toward, and that's going to make you tankier and allow you to last a little bit longer in that fight, and you never know, that extra 3 seconds you last could be that next extra stun that you're waiting for on cooldown.
I was about to say, every second that you live is an extra second that your AD carry or AP mid or whoever is going to be able to wail on somebody on the other team a little bit more, and that tiny amount of time might make the difference, or even swing a fight in your favor.
There are plenty of times where I'll be losing, like, really early game, like our team in general, and we'll go look at whoever's fed, and it'll be like a Zin's out, and they're building just damage. And it's like, okay, guys, all we have to do is wait it out, because if we wait it out, he's going to just die immediately as soon as he dives in. So it really does help to, if you're behind, just build that extra tankiness.
Yeah, I guess we can't say it enough. Wards as well. Wards. So many wards that, you know, if you're an ADC, buy wards. If you're support, buy an extra ward. And, you know, buy as many wards as you can. I'm just saying, like, every player in this team and everywhere, every time you play the game, even when you're ahead, I'm going to say buy wards, because I don't think I can pound that into enough people's heads. Be honest.
And if you're a jungler or a support and you don't have a pink word on the map, you're doing it wrong.
Yes.
If you're anybody and don't have a pink word on the map, you're doing it wrong.
Yes. And I guess one other thing I do want to point out is don't make unnecessary plays like attempting to steal dragons if you're on blue side. If you're on red side, you're Lee Sin, you could probably do it, or you're Kha'Zix or somebody that can get in, get out really fast, or you have your flash up and you think you can steal it, but usually it's not worth your time to steal the dragon. Instead, you could be using that to ward up or get extra farm. And I think a lot of people overlook the fact that losing an early inhibitor sometimes can be a good thing. I'm not telling you to give it up. Don't ever willfully give it up. But sometimes losing that early inhibitor actually is a benefit to you, because you can start killing those super minions or killing all the extra minions pushing toward you, giving you more experience, giving you more gold. And, you know, you have to look at everything as a positive light as you possibly can, where if something is going down, you are going to gain something off of it. Usually that's just creeps coming at you more consistently than if you were on the other side.
And then if you do manage, to have a really good fight where they dive you under tower and you kill 2 of them, then use that time and push down and either use it to ward up or push down an objective, because that's what's going to get your team back in the game.
Yes, and objectives. If you can get one tower, that's one more tower that you didn't have in the past, and freeze up something. But don't do it at the cost of your life. It's really what it is.
Right.
It's one of those things, and going back to that dragon situation with don't like try and, you know, fight for a silly dragon fight if you're not going to win. It's not worth risking you or your team to try and attempt to steal a dragon if they're likely going to get it anyway. If you go in and you're your main peel or initiator for your team and you die trying to steal dragon and then they just turn around and kill like another 3 people, that's a much bigger advantage they just got than taking dragon would have been on its own. Mm-hmm. So,
well, yeah,
watch
with
respawn timers.
Yes, watch respawn. How many times have you yelled at us about that?
Yeah.
And that goes with the inhibitor talk too. If they do go to take an early inhibitor, usually the respawn timers early are pretty quick, and if they stick around too long, you can wipe them back up, take Baron, and the next thing you know, you have enough of a little advantage with the Baron buff to go and take an inhibitor of your own.
People are greedy. Like, even if you get behind, don't ever doubt that someone's going to make a stupid mistake because they're too greedy for their own good. Everyone that's listening to this podcast has done it at one point in time. I know I've done it several times, like over and over.
I'm perfect.
Well, no, of course not, Adam.
Yeah, I do think a big one that a lot of people don't look into or don't think about is if you're a jungler and you die going for dragon, that gives them a free window to go for Baron as well. Because they don't have to blow... I mean, they might have to blow a smite to steal it, but now they have that free window to walk over there and start the dragon up, and they can catch you funneling one at a time in to kill them, or they can try to set something up over at Baron, or, you know, wherever else. Like, losing a man on the team behind is worse for you than it is the enemy team, just because they can use that to the advantage, especially if it's the engager. Like, if you have an Amumu or something that dies and now it's an entire squishy team left over to defend a tower, you fucked your team because you thought that
they're not going to live if they just go in on them at the turret.
Yeah, the long and the short of this whole entire conversation is think before you act. And we know how hard it can be when you get to a certain level, you just start playing like you're stupid. Because you figure you know better, or you figure you can make flashy plays, and really you need to play consistently.
Don't try and like force a rationalization for going in and making a play. You should have a reason, like a reason and expected outcome for everything that you do. And if you don't, or you're just doing something on a whim because, oh, hey, it seemed like a good thing to try and steal that dragon to get a slight advantage, most of the time you're too busy thinking of whether or not it will or will not work. And it's going to come around to bite you in the ass for it.
And that's for everything, not just like mid-game and not just if you're losing. Like, everything you do from the moment you step in lane until the moment you finish the game, like, just ask yourself, why am I doing this before you do it? And you'll see a lot of those mistakes that are common disappear from your play.
There you go. I think that pretty much sums up that question. Really wraps it into a nice, neat little ball, huh? Mm-hmm. All right, Nathaniel, you are up, and Tom, you are on deck. Nathaniel writes in, when I'm playing ADC, I often struggle to pick my 6th item. How do I decide between Banshees, QSS, Scimitar, and Guardian's Angel?
A lot of this depends on what the enemy's playstyle is and how they like to engage. Like, say somebody's running, we'll bring back a Mumu or Sejuani or somebody like that who has a great engage. If they're just immediately going in and popping that right away without, like, really waiting for... to like see if you have a QSS or something like that. Like, they just go in and immediately pop stuff immediately. They don't pay attention to what you're buying or anything. I would say in a situation like that, Banshee's Veil can be great just because you can eat a lot of CC that's intended to hit your group as a whole, but not necessarily intended to hit you. So, like, saying you're playing Corki and you're doing a lot of poking from the back, and an enemy, a Mumu or Sejuani, go to engage on you, and they just happen to get a great ult and catch your entire team. If you have that Banshee's Veil, you know, you're going to be able to... It's going to shrug it off. The QSS is a little more involved, and you have to pay way more attention to what's going on. You have to micromanage Banshee's Veil a bit, but like the QSS, you have to... It's one of those things where to use it and get the most out of it, you have to really be paying attention to... whenever somebody's focusing you or certain other things. It's a much more involved item to use, whereas the Banshees just kind of shrug it off.
If you have QSS, you really need to have a strong understanding of what all abilities are doing in the game, and you need to have fast fingers as well.
Oh yeah,
or fast reaction times. Because same thing with cleanse. Do you see how quickly the professionals hit cleanse?
It's
instantaneous.
Like as the abilities are. It's the very quickest they could possibly hit it as soon as the ability hits them.
Right. Now, I don't expect you to be a professional player. Hell, I don't expect myself to ever have that. Technically, I'm an old man when it comes to video games. Like, there was a study a while ago. At 28, I am like 60 years old for, a video gamer. So there's no way in hell I can have that type of reaction. But you need to have a fast enough reaction that it makes the item worth it to use so that you are getting out of that stun as quickly as you possibly can to the best of your skill level. So if, it's 11 o'clock at night and you've been drinking the entire time, you probably want to go for that Guardian's Angel over that Banshee's Veil.
Right. And it's one of those things, too, you just have to look at who you're playing against. So say they have a Malzahar, and that Malzahar, likes to lead with the Q, so they would knock the Banshees off you and then ult you. If you had a QSS, it didn't matter if he hit you with the Q anyway. As soon as he ults you, you can pop out of it and get away. Is it a situation where even if you were going to break out of a stun, they have 2 more stuns to follow it up and you were going to die anyway, but if you had a Guardian Angel, you just pop back up and your team is able to hold them off long enough for like CC when you pop back up and you can get away, that you can actually like come back and do some damage after the fact. There are certain situations where these items are just going to be much better than their counterparts, and you just have to be able to recognize like what the enemy's play style is, what their abilities do, how they're utilizing abilities to get the most out of them, or how they're failing to use abilities to not get the most out of them. There's a lot of little things that go into what you should purchase, but Banshees is sort of, it's a safe pick. QSS way more involved, and Guardian's Angels basically like, hey, they're gonna go in and focus the shit out of me, but if my team can hold them off long enough for me to get back up and like have me return the fight, or I'm better off having 2 lives, or I have enough lifesteal where I'm gonna be able to really like make a comeback once I come back to life. That item is just also ridiculous. So there's a lot of factors that go into your choice of these items.
A couple things to remember about these items too is that QSS can get rid of suppressions like Warwick's ult and Malzahar ult. So that's really important because you can't get rid of them with Cleanse and you can't get rid of them with Mikhail, so that's the only way to get out of that. And then Guardian's Angel has quite a bit of armor on it, whereas the other 2 are pretty much primarily magic resist. So those are 2 things to look at also. So if you need a lot of resistances and you're squishy and you can't buy 2 different defensive items, or you just don't have the money to, then Guardian's Angel is a good way to go for that too.
I agree. I think that pretty much covers it. Much like everything else in this game, when it comes down to what you want to buy for your 6th item, you have to always look at the enemy team and decide based on what the team can do to you, and that comes with a broader understanding of this game and having. I would say it's kind of like a fighting game or anything else out there. You need to go play every character or every class to have a full understanding of what they can do and what they can do to you. So when you run into them, you understand how to counter that.
Well, and you just have to ask yourself too, if I buy one of these items, which is going to have the most impact for the way that the enemy team has been playing up until this point? And usually you can't go wrong with that answer.
I don't think so. All right, Tom, you're up. Do you think, a different type of question. He asked, do you think Riot should look into the loss prevention system in case it disconnects and AFKs?
I feel like that's great in theory, but I wouldn't be able to come with a practical way to do so without it being taken advantage of. People, like, I think it'd make toxicity worse. People would just start like screaming at people and trying to make them AFK or disconnect. Or maybe if you don't have a winning team, then you just AFK in champ select, something like that. I just feel like it's really easy to be abused. So if they could look into it, but I'm not sure if there's going to be a lot they can do. And I'm pretty sure that they've covered that before, where there's ramifications for every possible action that they could take.
I think it's kind of funny that we're hitting on we are talking about this question today too, because on Reddit today there was a post from somebody saying that Riot Light says there's work for a system to restart matches that start when disconnects and AFKs happen somewhere down along the pipes So for like a future feature, if somebody AFKs or disconnects before the game, they might put something in the game that allows you to either get like a restart for the game where the person who AFK'd is still going to get, in trouble, so to say, for leaving the game, but the other players on both sides aren't going to be penalized for it, particularly on the team that the AFK was on. But again, there's been so much talk about the abuse issues where there's been talk in the past about making it so that the enemy team could vote for like a mercy vote or other things too. It's just there's so many factors going into how this is going to work and making it healthy for the community as a whole. And until they figure out something like that, they're not going to be able to just throw something into the mix, into the game to make it work that people will be happy with.
Yeah, like Dave said earlier, I don't think there's any way to do an AFK system or loss prevention system without there being abuse. And with this many players and the way the game has been playing out for so long, that you can't just go in and make sweeping changes without there being some kind of repercussion to your actions. And as soon as you give somebody an inch, they're going to take a mile.
Well, and think about this too. There's already been a whole bunch of DDoSing or like scripting issues. I mean, I knew there was a script in the past that people could use that would disconnect like the enemy team in certain situations or disconnect everybody but you in certain situations. If you're losing a game and you ran something like that and stated if there's an AFK, you get like a free pass for the game or whatever, they could just run something like that or figure out some way within the coding to really screw up, disconnect everybody. And then, hey, look, I didn't lose any LP for that game, so whatever. You might see way more rampant cheating or just like manipulation of strange little things like that would just be really unhealthy for the game as a whole.
Right. I'd be interested to hear more about the reset and all of that Light has going on. But in terms of just handing out loss prevented, I feel like that's just going down a road that we just don't want to go down as a whole. I feel like it would do more harm than good.
I agree. I don't think there's really too much more we can really discuss about loss prevention at this point. I think it's a cool idea to think about. It's a cool idea to throw around and figure out some way to do it, because yes, that is a toxic piece of the game, but realistically there's no way to do it without someone abusing the system, and I think we all agree on that point.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, we're gonna move on to the next question from this mailbag episode. Mickey, you are up. Nathan, you are on deck. Mickey gives us a scenario. So, you're stuck in a 1v1 situation for 10 minutes in the top lane. The jungler hasn't shown, and you haven't been able to force the enemy laner out. We all know that. You're sat there, you're just farming. It's like Mundo versus Malachi.
So this is a regular top lane game.
Yeah. A regular top lane game when Nidalee is banned.
Yep.
Suddenly you realize your team is down 10 kills and the enemy is knocking on your inner turret. Do you leave the top lane to help your team defend, or do you risk losing your top tower? Okay,
here's a big thing. Your inner turret is much more important than your first tier outer turret.
Your first middle turret is more important than your top turret and your top outer turret. The big thing is, if your team is screaming at you to leave top lane and come into the enemy come into your jungle, even at the risk of you dying to help, because I think the big thing here is a scenario I can see a lot is there's a top laner sitting in the top lane. And now they've been able to chase people out after a unsuccessful or maybe a successful dive, but people are walking away with low life, and now they're walking back up toward you to the jungle, and your team is screaming at you, "Go get him! If you were there, you could help!" You should be moving 10 seconds ago to help that team fight that's starting.
I was about to say, this is one of those situations, too, where if it's, this situation, like you've been in the top lane for this long and you're just now noticing that they're pushing into your top turret, you've already done a lot of wrong things up until this point. You just completely neglected the rest of the map. It's one of those, like, I'm going to call it the Nasus syndrome, where you're just sitting top trying to focus on stacks the whole game and you forget that there's an actual game going around you. You have to pay attention to what's going on around the map, because again, you winning your lane, yes, it might influence whether or not you win the game if your teammates are doing well, but if the rest of the map's losing, it's highly unlikely that you in one lane is going to be able to just go and completely carry against 4 fed people in the enemy team.
Yeah,
And if you get to that mid lane fast enough, you create a 4v5 situation because that person in top lane, his team's winning. He doesn't want to lose his lane. He wants to push you to tower and get that tower. So you're going to react and he's not, and all of a sudden you have a numbers advantage. And even if they're ahead of you, you're going to come out ahead in that situation most of the time.
Mm-hmm. He did. There is more to this question. I kind of paraphrased it. Like one of his examples was the jungler is 6-0, and people are on like sprees, and it's 10-2, that type of thing. But even then, if you have moved at the right time in the top lane to when you notice the enemy's going to start engaging on that inner turret, you essentially, like you said before, you're turning that into a 4v5. But you're also potentially winning that 4v5 and walking out 3-0, and now you got 3 people up that can roll, or 3-1, and now you're rolling down mid lane with those 3 and taking those towers back, or you're rolling the dragon and taking it back. You're getting your jungle. There's so many different things you can do with those number advantage that you have after you win that team fight. Even when you were behind, you can win team fights. And
if they are up ahead like that, you also just collected yourself a bunch of bonus gold from bounty stuff. So it's one of those things, like, don't be afraid to let your top turret die if it means you're going to have an impact to help your team come back as a whole. And if the enemy top laner, top's a long lane, it's going to, for the most part, take him a while to push it to that next turret. And say that you had, like, an AD carry and a support that were having a really bad time bot. If he's pushing that, I would much rather have them go and collect some of that CS early while you're, using some of your evened out power to hold like the 3 people that are pushing or 4 people that are pushing mid at bay while the rest of your team's trying to catch up a bit as well.
Mm-hmm. You're too selfish if you sit up there by yourself. You're too selfish if you're not using teleport to help your team. You're being a selfish player by not helping your team. The only time I say stay top like that is if you're winning top lane. You've taken out that top turret. You can continue to push it down. You can take a turret for the one turret they took. But your team, you can tell your team is able to turn that fight around.
Or if you're putting out so much pressure top lane that it's forcing the enemy team to come and deal with you. Like that is also a great, like, you're a 10-0 Tryndamere and you're just shitting on top lane and they send 3 people up to kill you. And you got away twice and maybe you die once. Screw it. Keep doing it. If your team's taking objectives around the map, you're winning the game in that regard. But if the enemy is just, they don't care that you're in top lane or that you're winning or you're not able to take turrets as fast as they are with a 4-man push, you're not helping your team at all, and you're actually kind of helping the enemy win. So
right, and use your head about that too. There are champions that are really good at split pushing, and then there are ones that are really bad at it. So don't just split push for the sake of split pushing. That goes back to earlier when we asked, make sure you ask what you're doing every time you do it so that you always have a plan in mind.
I've had the scenario, and I think this one is a little bit different from the question, is when you're in top lane, you are winning a little bit, you're able to duel, you're kind of doing the split pushing thing, and now the enemy team has sent everybody bottom, and they can't stop you. That's at that point, it's better for you just to continue to push down top lane and roll down as hard as you can. We saw Doublelift do it. He did it successfully. The team didn't do so well, but he was vain and started rolling down the bottom tier and in one of the promotion games, and he took out the second turret while the enemy team took out their CLG's second turret for nothing else. So they got something for that because your team was able to hold that type of thing, or the enemy team has wiped you and now it started taking turrets, but you're Nasus and you can take turrets just as fast as 3 people on the enemy team. Again, the whole point of this episode really is what can you do? Think about your surroundings and what is my next step, like a chess game. Think ahead. I hate, League of Legends is that it's a chess game. So, anything else? Add to that question? We good?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we crushed it.
We're gonna crush these questions tonight. Not have any more to do a podcast with.
I know.
All right,
Nathan, we'll just ask for more. They'll send us more.
I actually still have a backlog of more questions.
Okay. See, well, you're complaining and you have no reason to.
Nah, I like it when people send us questions. It's fun. Because what's gonna happen is here next Wednesday we're gonna have Ghost Crawler on. Oh, spoiler alert!
Yeah.
And then we're going to be backed up after that for questions and content to talk about because Worlds will be sending then, and then
What great timing.
I know, it's going to be fun. Nathan writes, is it better to have a full 6 item or 5 items in one ward?
Depends what role you're playing and depends what character you're playing. If you're the AD carry, probably way better off to finish a full 6-item build and continue to carry your team to victory. If you're playing somebody in the jungle that's kind of a tanky utility jungler, I would not hate you if you ended up getting rid of one of your items and picking up a Sightstone just to provide more wards for your team. It really depends on your position. Like
we kind of went over it before, to be honest with you. Like, if you're at the point in the game that it's 6 items and a ward, it depends on what it depends on what role you are. If you're a support, more likely you're gonna have the wards anyway. 'Cause you're gonna have Sightstone. Everybody on your team is gonna have a sweeper probably at that point. And now, what is your 6th item? Are you actually sitting on a full 6th item, or are you sitting on pieces
like a phage?
Because here's how the way I look at it normally is if I'm going to go to my 6th item, that cloth armor that I'm going to pick up toward whatever it is isn't worth my time to sit on when I could have 3 wards in my inventory.
Right. And that's a good point. Everyone should have sweepers by that point in the game. And then your support has 3 wards, and then your jungler probably has a couple wards. And at that point, if you're using your sweeper, you're counteracting their vision, and you should all be pretty much grouped by that point in the game. So it's really hard for one person to just get caught out. So with having like 3 or 4 wards on the map, if you put them in the correct places, you should be okay if you're sweeping properly.
Another piece of that too is if both teams, for the most part, are full item builds as well, you shouldn't be wandering around in the enemy's jungle enough as it is anyway. You should like be pushing to try and end the game, or if you're slightly behind, I guess you're losing team fights, you're trying to defend because they're pushing. The only times you would be going into like risky territory would be going for a dragon, which you don't need if you're full item build, and a baron, which you have a support and somebody like potentially jungler who can also ward as well. I would be trying to close out the game at that point.
Right. And if you are going to go with the 5 items and 1 ward, at least buy 5 items and a Sightstone. And then if you have to go like a Ruby Sightstone, because at least it gives you a little extra tankiness. And then it's just more than just a few wards. But usually I would think at the end of the game, your Sightstone from your support and a ton of sweepers and like 1 other warding trinket should be enough to kind of get you by as long as you're all together.
Yeah, it's so dependent. A lot of these questions you guys ask is just so dependent on what is going on in the game and why. When you look at professional players, it doesn't really seem like they do the same thing twice anymore. In a 5-game period or even a 3-game period, and that's because it's so situational on where the enemy is, what the enemy's doing, and like we've said earlier, just kind of recap the whole. It's you're roaming as 5, so if you're catching somebody out, they're out of position and they're not doing their job correctly. You could try to argue that walking out and warding is doing your job correctly, but not if you have no vision or you're getting caught doing it. So I would almost, and also at the same time, when it comes to wards, I would say grabbing 1 pink over the 3 normal can be very helpful instead, because there's a number of games in solo queue where you're going to drop that pink in that weird one-off bush or behind blue or something. It
lasts forever.
And no one's going to ever see it. And now you can sit on that cloth ward because you've given vision to your team for the 50 minutes of the game.
Or you can just sit in that bush and hope to pick somebody off because you know that bush is definitely not warded and the area around it is definitely not warded.
Right. Yeah, the value of pinks is just too high in this game, at the point in the game that if you're not buying a pink as any role at some point in the first 30 minutes of the game, you are hindering yourself and your team.
Yeah, and everyone thinks like, oh, I'm playing an ADC or I'm playing mid. I don't have the money to do that. I know several like plat and diamond ADCs who get a pink on their first or second back just for that extra vision, and they'll last all game. But the vision that you get from that, the ganks that it stops, the picks that you can make is invaluable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you were one of those people who watch the pro players play, you'll notice on their first back, most of them are picking up pinks. Like you said, the mid laners, they do, and they're dropping it in a bush somewhere. Mm-hmm. And they get 3 minutes of vision out of that thing. They've more than paid for it. They get a minute vision out of it, and they're happy.
If I get a first blood as a jungler, that's the first thing I buy, and I throw it either, if I think the enemy jungler is going to be farming their jungle, I'll actually throw it like behind their red buff or something. If I think they might invade more, they're going to be ganking, I throw it in one of my brushes in the jungle, or I throw it somewhere along the river. It's just that one purchase can pay itself off so many times, and just avoided ganks, or just knowing map movement, or keep like knowing if they're going for a dragon or something. It for 100 gold, there's like nothing better.
Right.
Yeah, regular award is 75 gold. It's not like you're paying that much more, and it lasts so much longer. And the best thing in the world when you're a support or an ADC is you take that pink ward and you put it in one of the, either your tri bush or the river bush closest to you. Like if you're in putting it in the tri, then you put it in that little arm that's closest to you. The other support will come and drop a ward in there, and they'll think, oh my god, I just cashed out, let me kill this pink ward for 30 gold, and then you'll get a double kill, because they will not stop attacking that damn ward.
I love that. That's probably my favorite thing. That he's just spending his time not getting XP over there, and you're like, yep, just keep going, I'm going to keep smacking you. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Blitzcrank, and I just pulled you over, that type of thing. Like, silly. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on a couple questions down here to Nick's question. He wants to know, is Blue Ezreal still viable? If so, how should he build him? And when should you use him? I don't know about you guys, but I don't feel like Blue Ezreal is viable.
I haven't seen a good Blue Ezreal in a really long time, and to be perfectly honest, I just don't like it when I see... Like, I love seeing an Ezreal in the enemy team.
Oh, I do too.
I'm not afraid of Ezreal at all. I haven't been for a long time.
The big problem with the game right now is it really does come down to mid game and having those powerful mid game or super late game
hard carries.
It's early and super late game hard carries,
right?
Or it's early and mid game hard carries right now that you can really use their advantage to. And Ezreal doesn't really fall into any of those categories tightly. Right, as tightly as Lucian does.
He's one of those. He's one of those champions that's kind of like great all around, but he's not great at any one thing in particular. So that actually makes him weaker than most of the others. Like there isn't a situation that I would rather have an Ezreal than a Corki.
Right. Or Tristana.
Or exactly. It's just
get a free card.
The only reason I brought up Corki was just because they're pretty similar in the fact they're both AD casters. But I would still rather have a Corki in almost any situation.
Well, I wouldn't play Ezreal or even Blue because Blue Ezreal can be great in lane. Ezreal's a good early laner, as always, 1 to 3, as long as you have mana. He's safe. He can poke hard. If a good Ezreal can really put some damage and put some hurt on the enemy. You go back, you go pick up a Sheen, or you go pick up, whatever it is, and you're still being a bully in lane. But once you've made it out of there, and now you have to build that tier, or you have to build that Iceborne Gauntlet, or you have to build the Essence Reaver, you don't do as much as the enemy with the same amount of gold. Because at some point you have to cripple yourself to bring utility.
Well, and you're going to get into that team fight situation where the enemy has that top lane Maokai who you're now hitting for less than a 20th of his health every time you're autoing him. Meanwhile, he just completely disregards the fact that you arcane shifted and now is chasing you down, spamming W on you, and you're never getting away from the enemy team.
Yep. Yeah, he just doesn't do enough damage. Like, really, his bulk of his damage come from a Q auto, kind of move away, another Q auto. He doesn't get a lot of chance to auto attack until he gets his stacks up with his passive. Unlike other people like Jinx, who gets that right away. She only needs 2 autos to really match what Ezreal's getting.
And AD casters that utilize Sheen, you have a lot of burst, like just upfront burst that you can get from characters like Corki and Lucian. It's just I just don't think Ezreal's in that great of a spot right now. Don't get me wrong, he's fun to play, but he's...
Well, if not Essence Flux.
Essence Reaper. Or Arcane Shift.
Arcane Shift. If Arcane Shift shifted its cooldown like Lucian, where it was reduced cooldown every time he hit a Mystic Shot or something, he would start coming... I think he would start seeing more play.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it's a pretty long cooldown.
That's like 12 seconds. It's like it goes from anywhere from like 8 to 12 seconds, if I remember correctly. I mean, it does get reduced.
If you max it second, you can get it to be 12 seconds. Then with a little bit of CDR, you can get it down to 8. But if you're not leveling up that fast, something like that, it is a very long cooldown compared to some other stuff.
Compared to the free reset that Lucian gets after a full combo, But yeah, I think if he had that, he would see more play. He might actually see as much play as like the really good Ezreal players would come back playing Ezreal. I know a lot of the Koreans liked him quite a bit because of his mobility and his high poke damage. We could see poke comp come back into flavor, or favor rather. I said flavor. Like you said, it's the tanky top laners or the super utility top laners that aren't going to die that are really keeping him down. Not to mention at the end game, Ezreal doesn't stand up to a Tristana.
I was about to say, if you're gonna try and outduel Tristana as Blue Ezreal, she's gonna hit you 3 times and you're dead. Like that's not even a joke. Like she's going to crit your face off and you're dead. And then it doesn't matter
kind of
how.
Begs the question: why is Caitlyn not being played right now?
Right.
Because we're seeing where they're seeing like super aggressive early, just like Lucian, Corki, who do fairly well into mid and late.
Or just those giant late game powerhouses.
Yeah, or the giant late game powers, just like Twitch and
Tristana.
Tristana. So why has Caitlyn fallen off of the mark?
Kate's always one of those champions that's either really, really popular or not in favor at all. And she doesn't really change that much. It's just kind of like, maybe it's the alternatives. Maybe people are just more excited to play Trist and jump in, kill 3 people and jump out. I don't know, but Kate has always been one or the other.
Kate. It's the same thing with like Jax. People forgot Jax was good until like the end of the last season in Worlds, and then he was picked up again, and then he wasn't played for a while again, and then we saw him again midway through this season LCS. It's weird.
That's what I'm saying. I think I don't think she gets any worse or changes really any of the items. Like she wants IE first.
Right.
She's always pretty much built IE or BT first.
And she's still ridiculously safe early.
And obviously she's not as good as Tristana, just because Tristana gets tons of attack speed from her kit and is, safer. But yeah, like you said early, she's a giant lane bully early. She has the range to siege turrets, and she has the range later in the game to be effective. And it might just be that you have to get one extra item on her to do as much damage as like a Twitch or a Tristana.
And maybe we're not seeing her as much because she's not being played in an LCS sort of thing. But again, like if you're a good Caitlyn and you're playing her in solo queue and you can get that big of an advantage early, you can shut down 2 people in your lane and win the game right off that. Yeah. So
I honestly forgot Caitlyn existed until I just was thinking about it now.
People will be playing her again because Headhunter skin is so good.
I did see her a couple times.
Oh, it is so good.
Yeah, it's so good.
Oh, the Headhunter skin bothers me because I'm used to the animation on her normal queue, and now the Headhunter one looks smaller, so I get hit by it all the time. That's really annoying.
It's so good.
All right. We will go to our next question then. Well, Astano writes, if you had to pick a champion that was good, not just decent or viable, in all roles of the game, who would you choose and why?
All right, this is going to be an unpopular answer because, non-meta pick, but honestly, I think Quinn can be played in almost any role, any lane other than maybe support. You could jungler if you really wanted to, but she could definitely do it. Not saying it'd be great, but it would work. There's just so many champions in the game right now, and a lot of champions that are going to be absolutely great in jungle, top, and mid can't ever fill an AD carry role. You might be able to pull a support role off with them, but it's just how the champion, stacks up.
Annie, you could probably pull off in any role if you really wanted to. AD Annie is actually not terrible. It's not great, but
it's like the old school AD Orianna bullshit.
Right.
It's just like Caitlyn. Caitlyn can roll in any role as well.
Right.
A lot of those AD carries can
go anywhere. Yeah.
J4 is another good one if you're
J4 has always just been, again, he's one of those just great pain in the ass champions, and people sleep on him and forget all about him, and then he shows up and stomps you, and you're like, that J4 just built nothing but damage and killed half of our team. Why didn't he die?
Right. That's this question. I mean, I like the question just because it's a fun, question to get around. But if you're looking for champions, you can play anywhere. J4 really is your go-to because he can play every role but AD carry. He can play top, mid, and jungle effectively. He can play AD carry it not at all, but he can do like a Leona J4 bottom lane type of thing, and he can do support. Just as well as any other support that has an engage. It's
just his mana has the mana.
120 issues. Mana for an EQ combo, and you can do that twice pretty much. But
again, I could see so many AD carries filling both a top, mid, and bot lane role. Like Varus would
See,
be.
we didn't pick Morgana. She could do anything, any of all of that. too.
Morgana's always been
Yeah.
great at everything, but that's the other thing. Like, she's one of those just great all
Swain
around
jungle. We can do Swain
don't be
anywhere.
Wrecker. Don't be Wrecker, please.
He can play top. He can play mid. He can also jungle. We've seen it happen. Urgot can
can
do the same
support, I
damn
guess.
thing. Yeah, see, you can support.
Why
Yeah,
is it
another
all
move.
these like weird non-meta picks that could do all of these things and they're not played at all?
Probably because that's why. Because they can do so many things, they don't specialize into one.
Yeah,
Right.
it comes back to that all-roundedness. They're great at a lot of things, but they're not just phenomenally powerful at one.
And Riot tries to balance around like one or two roles. And that's why you'll find a lot of champions that really only fit really successfully in a couple of them. Yeah, and like you guys just mentioned, it's really hard to have someone that's successful in every single role because that means they have too much utility, too much damage,
Right.
too much tankiness.
I got one. Nidalee. Done.
Champion.
Moving on.
Well, we're going to answer one more question for tonight, actually. I'm saving a couple of these for when Dom gets on the podcast because I want Dom and Days to talk about it together. But we're going to talk about this one about the sight stone. So Nathan writes in, last question of the night, Nathan. When I buy a sight stone, I normally always get a sweeper as well. Good choice. Thumbs up there. I don't think I'm using the sweeper quite right, though, because I never seem to be finding any wards when I sweep. I normally always sweep the normal ward spots, but I'm wondering if I should be waiting to sweep only when I know where a ward is at. If you have any other tips for using sweeper, I would love to hear your advice.
All right. Here's a big thing I love when having both a sightstone and a sweeper. If you're playing support or you're in a role where you can ward up a bunch of places or you like to proactively ward, the more that you like forward ward spots that the enemy is likely to roll through, you can definitely tell where they're warding just based on that if you're paying attention to your wards. So your bot lane, you have a ward in their tri-brush. They decide to go and walk past to the middle of the river and then run back through their tri-brush and come back in the lane. Then they definitely warded their river and you can go sweep that and collect your free money. It's one of those things where this sight stone itself will actually pay off in nabbing enemy wards with the sweeper if you're using it right. And if you're sweeping areas that are commonly warded and you're not finding anything, then I don't know. It's weird.
I think good question is like what elo is this at? Because you might just be at an elo where nobody's warding. That's possible.
That's true too.
When you get Sightstone, there's two different answers. If you're in lane, you do what Cher said. You get Sightstone, you put a ward in Try, you put a ward at Dragon, you put a ward in their lane bush. You'll see them drop a ward. And as soon as you see them drop a ward, you should do two things. One, you should type it out in chat. Anyone who's ever played with me knows that as soon as someone drops a ward, you just type in real quick 1232 drag ward. And then you've communicated with your jungler and he can avoid it or come when it's out. But then you know how to sweep it. It's really easy, like Chira mentioned. Mid and late game, it's a little bit hotter because they're going to be going around. The support's going to be warding where you won't have vision of them. And come that mid game into late game, every time that your trinket is off of cooldown, you should be sweeping. You want to sweep the most common bushes. I sweep bushes all the time and when there's no wards in them, but it's worth it because you still catch them sometimes. So every single time it's off cooldown, you should be practicing using it.
You should, if you're missing wards or not finding any at all, that's not a bad thing because now you know what's safe and what isn't. Specifically later in the game, if you have upgraded your sweeper and now you have swept and you've walked around for the 4 or 5, it's 8 seconds really, you get enough to kill 2 wards. But now that you've walked around the entire dragon pit through the bush and everything, and you've seen no wards, or you just caught the edge of one ward as you went out, you can ping somebody to pick it up. But not finding wards is never a bad thing because, like I said, you now know where they've warded or know where they haven't warded. You can just assume that so I've swept Dragon Pit and I walked in Little Bush. They don't have any of this warded, but they might have the River Bush warded still. So we have to be careful with there. But at the same time, if you swept it, you can use that information. It's all about grabbing what you've been given and using it to your advantage.
And say you then know that there's not a ward in that area, and you decide to throw your own ward just a little farther up or anything like that. Now you know that the area that you're currently in isn't warded, and you can set up an ambush, or you can get your team in a position to wait to catch somebody, or just wait until they go past you so you can go like ninja the turret that only has 2 hits left on it, or anything like that. If the other time you should always use sweeper is if your team likes to sit in a bush, or there's more than 2 people in a bush and you don't see anybody on the map, you need to sweep that shit real quick, because it's very likely that there's a ward in the place that you're standing, and you don't want to be there when the enemy decides to engage on you. It's like the second time this podcast I've talked about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a support main. I get excited about finding wards, but you should be more excited when you don't see any, because then they have no clue what you're doing. Like, I love a support who doesn't ward. I will go against them all day long. And it gives you a huge advantage. And you asked for other tips when using sweeper. I'm not sure there's a whole ton of tips and tricks to use it, but a lot of times you definitely want to upgrade it. You want to upgrade it around like 20-25 minutes. You want to try to get the Oracle's version of it. That will give you a lot more vision, and you can walk around and find more. And before that, you can usually position that circle over 2 bushes, especially when you start doing the river bushes. You can actually catch 2 bushes in that if you don't have it upgraded yet.
If you're really damn good, you can use it to trick people to think you're going back by sweeping yourself by sweeping a ward and starting to back right after the ward dies, but not actually backing. They might think that you are, going all the way. Or if you have somebody, like if you saw, there was a good one with Curse, and they knew the vision that the ward had, and it was just outside the bush. So Voyboy starts going back, and they kill the ward in the bush. So I think their LMQ thought, oh, that means they're all going back. Well, they didn't actually, and now they've killed you at Baron. So that's probably the other one is talking with your team and knowing the ranges of wards, but that's like super advanced technique and not something I suggest that you really work on. But I know I got a little distracted here between GG Chronicles website and the dog and everything. That's been a pretty
you can send her to me.
No, she's just laying out there on the vent. So anything else, guys, before I wrap up this podcast? I know it's been a jam-packed show, really.
Hey, we got a lot of fan questions done, man.
Hey, that's what they like us for. So I hope you guys like the 3-man show. We promise never to do it again.
You make it sound so much
That was a joke and nobody laughed.
Never do it.
You're a jerk.
God. It's like
I don't even want to do this anymore. You're so mean.
Playing to a bunch of... Anyway, so... All right, guys. Thanks for listening to the Trinity Force podcast, the Sombercast. No one has been excited the entire podcast. Nobody like,
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm always excited.
I hope this.
I'm
is
also
your first
really
time
sore,
listening.
so that's
if this is your first time listening to the podcast, I apologize. Tune in next week to hear us again. Anyway, guys, that's episode 194 of the Trinity Force podcast.
Trinity Force podcast.
We'll see you all next week. Peace.
Love you. Bye.